across the Pennines. Now, this is the yellow warning area from the Met Office. Typically, snow amounts in towns and cities on lower ground won't be an awful lot, but high ground, in the extreme case, we're talking about 25, maybe 40 centimetres of snow, for example, across the higher levels in the Pennines. And then Friday morning, that low pressure clears away. We're sort of in between weather systems. This is very early in the morning. Could be some wintriness a little bit further south, depending what time this weather system clears away. And then I think it should clear up a little bit through the course of the afternoon. It's going to be a chilly day, quite a strong wind blowing in from the north, a really wintry second half of the week.
Got a story to tell?
What I'm going to try and do is go to schools and educate a lot of people about it.
Just because somebody's disabled doesn't mean they can't achieve something.
If you're aged 11 to 18, the BBC can help you tell your story.
This is the world we're being left, a world made of concrete.
Tell us your story idea. Enter now at bbc.co.uk/young reporter competition.
This is BBC News. Welcome if you're watching here in the UK or around the globe. I'm Geeta, Guru-Murthy. These are the top stories. Britain's government is accused of utter failure for new asylum rules to stop migrant boats crossing the Channel. But Prime Minister Rishi Sunak insists his plan is the people's priority.
We're doing what's right, we are acting with compassion, we are acting with fairness, and we are acting to respect the laws and borders of our country.
This is their 5th Prime Minister, their 6th immigration plan, their 7th Home Secretary, and after all this time, all they offer is the same old gimmicks and empty promises.
A BBC spokesperson has said one of its highest paid presenters, Gary Lineker, is being spoken to after he criticised the government's immigration plans on social media. Kyiv denies any involvement in reports that a pro-Ukrainian group was behind September's attack on the Nord Stream pipeline.
I think that investigation of official authorities will describe every details, because it's like a compliment for our special forces, but this is not our activity.
The UN Secretary-General is in Ukraine for further talks on extending a deal to export grain via the Black Sea. The daughter of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex has been christened at the couple's California home. Princess Lilibet Diana was born last June and christened on Friday. Hello and welcome. Britain's Prime Minister has been defending his government's new plan to stop migrants arriving illegally in the UK on small boats. Rishi Sunak told the House of Commons that only the Conservatives would stop the boats. But the Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the government is simply offering gimmicks and empty promises. Well, the measures announced yesterday would effectively ban those who come here illegally from claiming asylum and require that they be detained and deported.
The Prime Minister says they will detain people who aren't eligible to claim asylum here and then return them. Well, they already tried that under the last legislation. Last year, 18,000 people were deemed ineligible to apply for asylum. That's the easy bit, the talk. But as for the action, Prime Minister, how many of them have actually been returned?
He asked about arrests, he asked about our laws. Actually, when I was in Dover yesterday talking to our law enforcement officials, what did they tell me? Precisely because of the law that the Conservative government passed last year, they have now been able to arrest more than double the number of people they did before. 397 in the last 6 months. But stopping the boats, Mr. Speaker, stopping the boats is not just my priority, it is the people's priority.
Well, that was some of Prime Minister's questions a little earlier. Our correspondent Jonathan Blake is in Westminster. And Jonathan, we saw quite a fiery, sort of personalised session of Prime Minister's questions today. We've known for a while that the Tories want to weaponise immigration. It's something that they feel helped win them Brexit and that has been politically useful to them at a time when they're lagging in the polls.
Well, watching the exchanges in the House of Commons today, it's clear that Conservatives feel they're on the front foot with this issue. There was cheering from the Tory backbenchers and jeering at Sir Keir Starmer's questions. And Rishi Sunak seemed more confident, I think, than usual with his answers. They feel that Labour doesn't have a plan to tackle what the Conservatives see, at least, as a very important issue, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 stated political priorities. But that hasn't stopped a lot of criticism coming the government's way from Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour Party and elsewhere about this latest plan. And as Sir Keir Starmer put it, what he sees as the latest utter failure of the government to tackle this issue. He was trying to pin down the Prime Minister on how many people have been deported under existing laws that the government has brought in and when exactly it plans to have this new system up and running of turning people back and sending them away. But because it isn't something that Sir Keir Starmer has made a political priority of his own, there is a danger for him that he's seen on the defensive about this issue, which many people feel strongly about. His tactic is clearly to try and press the government on exactly how its plan will work and point to what they see, what Labour sees as previous failures of this Conservative administration and previous ones to do anything about it.
And Jonathan, the language is incredibly heated on this issue, as it often is. We've seen rows involving, the BBC, one of the BBC presenters that we've mentioned, Gary Lineker, and we're also seeing fundamental questions at the heart of this about whether the government's plans go against the Refugee Convention. Is there a way of determining the consensus on that point without it going to the courts first?
No, not really. The government has set out itself that it cannot be sure its planned legislation will comply with the Human Rights Act, which is the bit of legislation that enshrines the European Convention on Human Rights into UK law. And indeed, many Conservatives are openly calling for the UK to withdraw from that international framework if these laws can't be put in place and can't be proven to be workable without constant challenges in the courts. That, along with the language that the government is using and some of the rhetoric that ministers are employing to pitch this policy, is where a lot of the criticism is centred at the moment. For example, the Home Secretary, seemingly in an email sent to thousands of Conservative supporters yesterday, Suella Braverman, talking about the government's attempts so far to tackle small boat crossings being blocked by a blob of the Labour Party, left-wing lawyers and civil servants. Now, sources close to the Home Secretary say she didn't sign off on that. They weren't her words, and she didn't see the email before it was sent out. Downing Street is saying that this is clearly an operational problem, and the mistake seems to have been with somebody at Conservative Party headquarters. But it's that general tone where the government has called into question there, deliberately or otherwise, the independence of civil servants that it will need to have on side and need to have trusting in what ministers are asking them to do if this policy is going to be effective. OK, Jonathan Blake in Westminster, thank you very much. Well, for more on that particular aspect of this story, I'm joined by Dave Penman, who is General Secretary at the Union for the Civil Service in the UK, the FDA. And Dave's written a letter to Rishi Sunak demanding an apology from Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, after that email in her name which blamed left-wing civil servants of blocking the government's attempts to stop channel boat crossings in the past without changing the laws. Dave, thanks very much for being with us. You might have seen that Downing Street is saying the Home Secretary did not, quote, sanction or sign off that email that was sent to Conservative supporters accusing civil servants of blocking attempts to stop the small boat crossings.